24th grade, we are ready for Chapter 20 in the Aurora County All-Stars. We left off at the end of Chapter 19. House is feeling pretty down. Their baseball practice got broken up by Clebo's mom, who's telling all the boys they have to go to the pageant practice, and House is feeling really sad that it doesn't look like they're going to be able to play the baseball game on July 4th. So they're walking over now to pageant practice and stopping their baseball game. So let's see what happens in Chapter 20. Chapter 20 starts with a quote by Yogi Berra, the catcher of the New York Yankees. "If you come to a fork in the road, take it." All right, here we go. "The show must go on, Miami." Finesse dabbed her eyes with a Snowburger's handkerchief, a huge handkerchief embroidered with a giant S that Snowburger's funeral home had given out to the bereaved for years. Now Finesse owned one, and she used it to good effect. The handkerchief was white. Everything else about Finesse was black. All black. Even her lipstick was black. She spoke through a mesh of a black veil. She wore no jewelry. She was in mourning, after all, but 3 enormous black feathers protruded from her hat. "She's a big, black-horned toad," thought House. "She looks like a black widow spider," said Ruby. "Who caught a vulture," said George. I'm going to adjust this just a little bit. There we go. Okay. "Who caught a vulture," said George. Melba stood next to Finesse, clutching her clipboard and hissing like a death row warden. "Shh!" Finesse held up a black-gloved hand as if she were signaling leniency for the doomed. "I am glad to see you all this morning, even though many of you are late, very late. I had every confidence you would join us, however. We have already divined some dances and skits. Rest assured we will fit you in. But let me begin at the beginning, now that I have you all assembled." Finesse cleared her throat. "As you all know," she said, "I was forced to leave you abruptly yesterday. One of our eldest citizens, Mr. Norwood Reinhardt Bogart Boyd, has..." Finesse put her handkerchief to her mouth for a long moment and then sputtered melodramatically. "Died. He's dead, Miami. Dead as a doornail. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. My great-granddaddy's greatest boyhood friend laying out at Snowburger's, still as death." She sobbed one great sob into her handkerchief. House and Clebo exchanged a look. Ruby blinked in amazement. It was Mr. Norwood's boyhood friend? "I didn't know he had any friends ever," said Wilkie Collins. "Of course he had friends," said Finesse. "Are you sure he's dead?" asked Clebo. "He's as dead as beautiful young Emily Webb in Our Town by Thornton Wilder," choked Finesse. She blew her nose in a ladylike manner. "Mr. Norwood Boyd asked for no funeral, no memorial service," she said, dabbing at her eyes. But... Finesse struggled to compose herself. She took a deep breath. "I think we are meant somehow to honor him with our pageant." House blinked. "Mean Man Boyd?" said Evan Evans. "What are we supposed to do? Kidnap kids around the country?" "Cook 'em?" said Arnold Hindman. Hesitant laughter rolled around the ball players. House kept silent. Finesse looked stricken. "None of these exaggerations is true, Miami," she said, fresh tears in her eyes. "They are rumors, lies. Mr. Norwood Boyd was a great man. My great-granddaddy can tell you the truth. Doesn't anyone here know the truth about Mr. Norwood Boyd?" House felt a prick at the back of his conscience. Still, he kept his thoughts to himself. "Ghosts!" cried Honey. She hugged Eudora Welty. "I know something about him," shouted Clebo. He caught himself as House sucked in his breath and glared at Clebo. "What do you know?" Finesse was suddenly delighted. "Do tell." Clebo glanced at House and changed his mind. "I know you ain't even related to the man. That's what I know." Finesse straightened her shoulders. Related is a relative term, mon ami. And I know something too, Clebo Wilson. She pulled a piece of paper from her straw tote bag and opened it carefully. My great-granddaddy was left a note by Mr. Norwood Boyd. The blood evaporated from House's face. A tingle spread across his shoulders. I wanted to keep it private, Finesse said, but Poppy told me I must share it with you all because it has meaning for our town on its birthday, and because our most famous citizen, Dr. Dan Devers, who ordered this pageant in the first place, would certainly approve. So I shall read it. Finesse took a deep breath. So did House. This note is shrouded in mystery, mes amis, said Finesse. Enveloppe de mystère. Finesse pointed a black-gloved finger at House. One must not read too much into such mystery. Read the dang note, growled Clebo. Finesse cleared her throat, snapped the note in front of her flamboyantly, and read. I see great things in baseball. It will take our people out of doors, fill them with oxygen, give them a larger physical stoicism, tend to relieve us from being a nervous, dyspeptic set, repair those losses, and be a blessing to us. Walt Whitman. Whitman! Baseball! House rocketed upright. He was dizzy with the thought. Clebo scrambled to his feet. That's what I say. Dyspepper and all. A blessing. Baseball. He sliced his glove back and forth in Finesse's direction, as if he might decapitate her with it. Look, me and some of the team were discussing it on the way over here, and we decided we ain't gonna participate in no pageant. We need to play our game. I'm playing, shouted Ruby. No, you ain't, said Clebo. House? But House's mind was somewhere else. In the midst of the clangor, he began to ask questions. Why would Francis have a note from Mr. Norwood Boyd? A note about baseball? Kids were talking all at once, like an organ majestic, a perfect band. And baseball? What about baseball? House began pacing. Mr. Norwood Boyd was trying to tell him something. He was sure of it. Melba Jane stomped a sandaled foot and shouted, Come to order! Hush! Right this minute! Oh, go stuff it, Melba Jane, hollered Clebo. We don't have to pay attention to you. Honey tiptoed Eudora away from the crowd and plopped down with her by the hose. She put her hands over Eudora's ears and watched. Clebo, cried Melba with indignation. Dr. Dan Devers is coming to this pageant, and your mama... My mama nothing, said Clebo. This is stupid. I'm going to get my dad out here. Lots of luck, said Boone. Finesse put her hands in front of her in a praying pose, bent her head, and stood silently until the group calmed. She looked up when all was quiet and said, It seems we have a revolt. Before anyone could agree with her, House said in a clear voice, No, we don't. He gestured to the ball team. We'll be in the pageant. He had no idea what it meant, just that it was true. You will? Said Finesse. We will? Said the ball players. No, we won't, said Clebo. But House had figured out something. Moves the symphony true. He knew what it meant. We can do what we want, right? He asked Finesse. You said it's our pageant. Yes, said Finesse in an uncertain voice. Then we'll play baseball, said House, and we'll have a pageant. How do we do that? Finesse had her handkerchief at her throat. I don't know, said House. You're the artistic genius. You figure it out. His face was hot with embarrassment, but there was a rightness to the words, so he kept on going in spite of himself. He tried not to think about the fact that he was talking more than he'd ever talked in front of people in his entire life, and that he was actually suggesting cooperating with his toad, Francis Schatz, making a spectacle out of himself and everyone else. He let his soul speak, or maybe it was the voice of Mr. Norwood Boyd's ghostly spirit, or the influence of Pip's sad story. Maybe it was those words from Walt Whitman written so long ago, the same words his mother had loved and sung. Suddenly it was all connected. Suddenly it made sense. Suddenly he had words to say. Anybody who wants to play ball can play. Kids scrambled to their feet, excited. Ruby hugged herself. Yes! No, shouted Finesse and Melba and Clebo all at the same time. Yes, said House and Ruby together. House entreated his ball players. Your mamas want you in this pageant, he said, and you want to play ball. We can do both. Everybody wins. We'll beat them redbugs, you'll see. I don't want to play baseball, shouted Honey. I want to tap dance. House scooped his sister into his arms. You can be a dancer, Honey. It came together for House, the mystery, the symphony, and he knew what he had to do. It involved dazzle and clangor, chorus, majestic, and perfect band. It included Francis Schatz and Ruby and Melba and Clebo and Honey and Miss Maddie, his father, the ball players, the mamas, all of Aurora County, Mississippi, even Eudora Welty. It involved baseball, a pageant, several tutus, most likely, and one beautiful treasure. The one thing House didn't bargain on was the betrayal. That's the end of chapter 20. Okay, 4th grade. There's lots to talk about right now. That was a big chapter. I do want to say a couple things to get you thinking. House just did something really big. Finesse doesn't seem happy. She doesn't seem to want the baseball game to be a part of the event, and she doesn't understand how they'll play baseball and do a pageant. The baseball players are freaking out because House just suggested that anyone can play, and House suggested that they will be in the pageant, and none of the ball players want to be in the pageant. Ruby Lavender is happy because finally she gets to play baseball with the boys. But there's a lot of chaos right now. There's a lot of chaos with a lot of different characters about what House just did. And House is a leader among his peers, and he's the captain of the baseball team. So when he says something like this, it really changes things. I want you to think about Mr. Norwood Boyd, and I want you to think about what we've learned about him. At the beginning of the story, all we knew about him was that kids said he ate babies and was scary and creepy and never came out of his house. Since the first chapter, we have learned a lot about him as a person. We've learned a little bit about what's true and what's not true, what are rumors, and what he stands for. I want you to think about Mr. Norwood Boyd and what we know about him, especially his friendship with Pip. And I want you to think about what we learned when Pip and House were in Norwood Boyd's home and had a conversation about baseball and about friendship. And I want you to think about how what House is doing right now with his friends, with the pageant, with the baseball game, how is that similar to what Mr. Norwood Boyd did for Pip and for the Aurora Angels and the baseball team that he played on? I want you to see the connection right now between House's actions and Mr. Norwood Boyd, his actions. So think about that before we start this next chapter. And I also want you to think about the cliffhanger once again. Deborah Wiles, the author, has left us with a cliffhanger. The one thing House didn't bargain on was the betrayal. Who's going to be betrayed? And how? I want you to make a prediction. Do you think it's House? Do you think it's another character? The one thing House didn't bargain on was the betrayal. We'll see what happens in chapter 21. See you later.